All right, hello everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Wolf. I am the acting director of the Mike Downs Center for Indiana Politics at Purdue University Fort Wayne. And the Mike Downs Center is working today with the Fort Wayne Media Collaborative. We've done so in the past, last fall, for municipal elections and to great success. And it meets the mission of both of these great organizations to be helping to provide the people of the state of Indiana and Fort Wayne with cutting-edge media information and public information and access to candidates. And so today we have the two candidates for the Democratic primary for the Indiana House, U.S. House District number 3. I'd like to also thank the Allen County Public Library, Josiah and Leanne, for helping to put this together, and as well the League of Women Voters, who have their vote 411 here today, and a great set of information for anyone interested prior to the primary election for information of how to get registered, but also how to vote early and access to everything else. But we want to begin today with letting the two candidates and welcoming them to give about a 3-minute talk about what their vision is, the reason why they're running, and then we're going to open it to some questions from the moderator, the Media Collaborative and I have developed, and then we're going to open it to you to be able to ask some questions. So we're going to look for about 2 minutes on the responses to those questions largely, but we're going to open with a 3-minute opening statement. So welcome. We'll begin with Phil Goss.
Hello, thank you, and it's good that you've come to listen to us and give us your consideration. Also, I'd like to extend my thanks to My Labor Radio, to Wayne TV, to the Fort Wayne Media Collaborative, of course the Mike Downs Center for Indiana Politics, and the Purdue Fort Wayne Political Science Department for organizing this forum. My name is Phil Goss. I am running for Congress. We have a situation in this country and the world which demands leadership in Washington. I can go there and do what needs to be done to make certain that our country leads the world, continues to lead the world, and continues to be a safe place for business, for people, for our economy. We have to address our problems, and that's what I want to do in Washington. I have 3 basic guiding lights, let's call them. That we must be good stewards of our people. That we must be good stewards of our land, water and air, of course, included. And we must be good stewards of our economy. If we are to fail in any of these 3 pillars, we fail as a society. Let's go do it right now.
Great, thank you. Kiley.
Sure, of course. Well, let me begin by also simply saying thank you. Thank you to the Fort Wayne Media Collaborative for putting this event on and bringing us together. And also thank you for your solutions-based coverage of issues facing our local communities. And to each and every one of you that are here and that are watching, thank you for sharing your greatest gift with us, the gift of time. Now more than ever, our democracy demands our time. Our democracy deserves our dialogue and our dedication, our courage and our commitment. So by showing up here and watching today, you're giving her just that. So thank you. I am a proud daughter of Angola, Indiana. That is where I'm from. That is where I was raised. Professionally, I've held the roles of advisor and leader. I have held the titles of teacher, professor, vice president, and consultant. My life's work has provided me with incredible opportunities to work here in Indiana and across the country. Politics was never a part of my plan. So this campaign did not start out in a room full of politicians and PAC donors. It started out as a conversation at the kitchen table. And like many families, we were talking about what is and our hope for what can be. And before I knew it, that conversation led to another, and then another. And people were sharing with me their hopes, their dreams, their frustrations, their trials, their tribulations, and it was then that I knew I could not stand idly by. I had to step up. I had to continue to serve. I had to continue my life's work, serving and empowering people and communities. We know that there are challenges before us, but we believe we can handle them together. So when someone asks me that question, why run? My answer is simple: people. And this office, believe it or not, is dedicated to serving the people of the 3rd District, our district, not power or ego, serving the people of our district, our families, our friends, and our neighbors. So it is with the same dedication to service and commitment to people that I am running for Congress.
Great, thank you. Gonna do some clarity check here.
Sure.
Thanks, appreciate it. Okay, we're going to begin with some questions here. Again, we want to keep this pretty tidy to a couple minutes. The first question, we'll begin in opposite order. We'll begin with Kiley, and then go to Phil. If elected, what will be your top 3 priorities for the first 100 days of your term?
Wow, where do we begin? I think one of the first things that I would really focus on is helping pass legislation to provide national protections and codify women's reproductive rights. I think that's critically important for women in our society, is to have those rights. Women should not have to nearly die to be found worthy of living when she can make the decision that's best for her and her family with her and her doctor. So one of the first things I would do is help pass legislation to codify women's reproductive rights and ensure that there are national protections in place. Another thing I think I would really focus on is something, it seems little, but it can be incredibly impactful. There's currently a bill sitting in committee that would help impact educators in our district. It would put more money back in their pockets by adjusting tax code and their federal tax deductions. So I'd focus on women's reproductive rights, education, and of course our economy, ensuring that we have an economy that works for everyone.
Great, thank you, Kiley. Phil Goss, again, if elected, what will be your top 3 priorities for the first 100 days of your term?
It's clear that we need to have term limits, probably age limits as well. We need to get that done now so that we can continue to have, or maybe we can have once again, a functioning legislative branch of the federal government. That will be one of my priorities. Another priority will be to ensure that we have adequate funding for the continued maintenance and development of our infrastructure, without which we have nothing else. Another would be to ensure that we fund the situation in Ukraine such that we are protecting their security, the security of our Western European allies, and our own security. Failure to do that will be far more costly in the future than what it will be right now to stop that aggression where it is.
Okay, thank you. This one's really quick. It's not a 2-minute. If you're elected, will you support giving Jeffries as Speaker if you're in the majority, or Minority Leader if you're in the minority? Kiley?
Yes.
Okay. Phil?
Yes.
Okay, great. Didn't think I would have to ask that question, but things are different these days. The 108th Congress, 18th Congress has been called one of the least productive in history, with only 34 bills passed between January 2023 and January 2024. What, if anything, do you believe is needed to change this, and how will you work to change it? We'll begin with Phil Goss.
We have obstructionists in Congress now who are not good faith actors. We have to compete with them at the various congressional elections around the country. And so by working through the democratic channels to change those people out and put in people who are good faith actors, that's one level. But that's from congressional district to congressional district. Right here in the 3rd District, what we're doing right now is a part of that. We also need to have people who are supportive of national dialogue and compromise to come to optimal solutions. And that's certainly something I represent. I understand that compromise is a part of the job description. It's something I fully intend to do, fully expect to do, and go to Washington with the idea that if we are to have progress, we we must certainly balance a variety of interests to come to that optimal solution, whatever the issue of the day may be.
Great, thank you. And again, Kiley, Adolf, we're talking about the lack of productivity by the recent Congress. What, if anything, do you believe is needed to change this, and how will you work to change it?
Sure. I'm just taking copious notes. I'm a former professor, so I've always got to write these things down. It is interesting that the current Congress is the least productive in recent history, and taxpayers' dollars and time are being wasted. You know, we can all agree that we all want a more prosperous society. We all want a more safe place that we call home. So it's critical that we all start to have dialogue and reach across the aisles and have those conversations about how we can all move forward together. And I will take that skill set that I've developed throughout my professional experience and working with diverse stakeholders in diverse communities and bringing people together to talk about those very things is how we can find common ground to build a better tomorrow together. And that's needed in Congress now more than ever.
Okay, thank you. This congressional district has been held by Republicans since 1995. Explain how in 2024, how this sets up for you as a candidate. What is your strategy to win the seat? Is it championing of a set of issues, leadership, getting out the vote, or something else? And we'll begin with Kiley Adolf.
Sure. Our approach is one vote at a time, one person at a time. Our district is large. It's made up of a diverse set of people. So we're approaching it as everyone has a voice and every vote counts. So one person at a time, one vote at a time. And we also have to be realistic, right? To your point, the seat has been held by Republicans for many, many years. But we can also look at voter turnout. Our voter turnout in Indiana is what, 49th, 50th? So the more we can get people to turn out and express their voice and utilize their vote, the more likely we are to turn this seat to Democratic. Trust me, there are a lot more Democrats in the 3rd District than we realize. And there are a lot more people in the 3rd District who are understanding and connecting with the democratic values of inclusion, of the importance of people and communities, and women having a choice. So I think it's a combination of meeting people where they are, getting out the vote, and focusing on the issues that are resonating with our communities.
Okay, thank you. Phil Goss, then again, what's your strategy to win the seat? Is it championing of a set of issues, leadership, getting out the vote, or something else?
Clearly, it's a combination of all three. I expect also to be able to reach across the aisle and welcome support of those who are on their way out of the Republican Party by forces not within their own control, and to give them an acceptable alternative. But insofar as the issues are concerned, yes, we need to work on the issues that have failed to be addressed most recently, or that have not been addressed adequately, and those issues are myriad. We need not mention them at the moment. Also, leadership. Washington has suffered from a lack of leadership. They've suffered from a culture which is more invested in social media and less involved in proper dialogue, in proper research, in proper exploration of problems and the potential solution sets for those problems. Also, the question of voter apathy in this district and in Indiana writ large. People don't vote because they fail to see how their vote may change something, or they fail to see why they should bother, because they don't see that indeed their vote and the results of their voting affect their pocketbook every day. It affects their individual liberty every day. It affects their own personal data and financial security every day. We need to make certain that our people are secure from financial worry, from data leaks, from bad faith actors which have free rein in this country.
Great, thank you. Now this question's a little bit long for context because of the difficulty of it, but the Democratic Party has a significant split on how to handle the Israel-Gaza conflict. Democratic primary voters have even used their vote to protest President Biden's support of Israel's Gaza campaign. Some in Congress have called on President Biden to demand an immediate ceasefire. Others have demanded a ceasefire, no invasion of Rafah, and more humanitarian passages to be created. What is your position, and would you call on President Biden to put conditions on military aid to Israel, and what would those conditions be? We're going to begin with Phil, and I'll be glad to read any of those specifics again.
So the Senate passed a bill which has Ukraine aid and Israel aid together. That's what the House was dealt. And there's a resolution that they could vote for which would force that bill to come to the floor. House Speaker Mike Johnson has been foot dragging, let's say, because he's not a leader, he's a follower. The idea of decoupling those two issues is not really on the table because it's what the Senate has sent over. And if we wish to decouple and send that back to the Senate, we're also only asking for further delays. Further delays cost people's lives every day, both in Gaza and in Ukraine. So we do need to aid, whether it's the situation in Gaza and Israel, the situation in Ukraine. We are the world's leader. We are the world's policeman. And so far too often we hear the objections that, oh, we can't afford it. That's not true. We can afford what we choose to do, and we can choose to be the leaders that we are. We can choose to be the world's policeman, which, for better or worse, it's our fate. Or we can choose to ignore that and let the world's security go down to such a level where it will not be safe for American exports to go overseas anymore. So yes, we need to fund it. We can't afford not to fund it. But we also need to understand that everybody has to play by the rules if we're going to be funding them. So IDF needs to step up and be more responsible for taking care of aid workers, some of whom I knew and who died on Monday. They need to make certain to have humanitarian corridors. They need to play by the rules of the Geneva Convention if they expect to enjoy American support.
But is there any conditionality yet on military aid or
To
for
my
President
knowledge,
Biden?
those conditions were not in the Senate bill. We need to move this forward and then throw on some conditions later.
Okay, great, thank you. Kiley, again, the split within the Democratic Party, what's your position on ceasefire, no invasion of Rafah, more humanitarian passages, and would you call on President Biden to put conditions on military aid to Israel, and what would those conditions be?
Sure. I think we have to remember the complexity of this situation in this particular question, and that two things can be true at once. We cannot forget the horrific attack on the people of Israel and how rape was used as a weapon of war and children were murdered. So yes, they have every right to protect themselves as a sovereign country. However, innocent lives should not be lost because of their desire to protect themselves. So yes, I would fully support conditioning aid at this point, as too many lives have been lost. Humanitarian aid is not reaching those who need it, whether it be food or medical supplies.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for your patience on the length of that and complexity of that question. So access to affordable housing continues to be a struggle for many Americans, particularly young people. If elected, will addressing this issue be a priority for you? How will you identify solutions to the affordable housing crisis, and what do you believe Congress's role should be? And we're going to begin with Kiley Adolf.
Sure. I think this brings up the broader idea of the economy, right? And how we need to ensure that we have an economy that works for everyone. The economy is personal to every Hoosier. The challenges the economy present affects everyone's ability to both support themselves and their families. And so here in the 3rd District, we deserve an economy that works for everyone. Workers, and we need to ensure that workers have access to earning a living wage and being able to afford housing. And there are some things that are being done here locally to address that very issue of affordable housing. And there are things that we can do and create this through line, both at the local, state, and federal levels, to ensure whether it's tax incentives for building, whether it's environmental incentives for the types of housing that's being constructed. So there's a role that Congress can play in ensuring that we have affordable housing in our communities.
Great, thank you. And so Phil Goss, again, if elected, will addressing this issue be a priority for you? And how will you identify solutions to the affordable housing crisis? And what do you believe Congress's role should be?
Yes, it will be a priority. We need tax incentives to encourage builders to construct low-cost housing for those who are currently stuck in rental markets, so they have access to their first starter homes. The reasons why we don't have as many now as we did in the past, for example, in the late 40s, is that builders find that it's more profitable to construct the McMansions than it is to construct more humble housing for those who are in need of a starter home. The older starter homes from the 40s for the GI people coming back from World War II, those are falling into disrepair and sometimes not habitable anymore. They weren't designed to last 100 years. We need to have these incentives, financial, to allow, through tax breaks, tax incentives, to allow the builders to make these types of homes as opposed to the McMansions, which are the more profitable answer for them right now.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. So we are moving to another longer question again. So you've both lived overseas and know that economic migration and refugees fleeing political oppression are occurring globally. The U.S. tends to view this issue through our own lens. But in Gallup's poll of the most important problems facing America, immigration has surged past the economy and inflation. What are your views on what is to be done on this issue? And we begin with Phil Goss.
I worked for the United States State Department in consular services, so I have had a first row seat in matters surrounding immigration and border security and visa security. First off, we need to understand this. No people are illegal, a term that we've heard bandied about by certain folks in this country. We need comprehensive immigration reform that protects the people who are trying to come here and start a better life. There are other things we can do to help their upstream countries be more stable so there's less incentive to come here to escape these, whether they're coming as economic refugees, refugees from political crisis, war, what have you. They are important people in the American economy, and we need to recognize that. We need to be exactly what the Statue of Liberty says, that beacon to welcome the huddled masses yearning to be free. And when we do that, we need to integrate them into our economy and into our society.
Thank you. Kiley, Adolf.
Sure. I think we can all agree, regardless of our party, whether Republican or Democrat, that comprehensive immigration reform is a priority. And we have to work to fix our broken immigration system. But we also need to ensure that we have a lawful pathway to citizenship. And we cannot forget that, just recently there was an immigration reform bill that was presented to Congress. And it's saying a lot when one of your most conservative senators is saying this is the best immigration bill we've seen in decades, but yet it still cannot get passed. So yes, we all agree that comprehensive immigration reform is a necessity. However, we need to ensure that we have lawful pathways to citizenship. And we also have to remember the impact that immigration has on our economic vitality. Here in Allen County alone, immigrant residents have contributed significantly to the county's GDP. And it impacts the economy by filling labor needs, by purchasing goods and paying taxes. So yes, we can all agree that comprehensive immigration reform is a necessity. However, we must not forget the impact that immigrant residents have on our communities, both culturally and economically.
Great, thank you. One of the signature pieces of legislation that Democrats have passed is the Affordable Care Act. The House Progressive Caucus has pushed for a single-payer health care, frequently called Medicare for All. President Biden has not supported this and has promoted Medicaid expansion in the American Rescue Act, and for Medicare to negotiate prices, push a $2,000 cap on out-of-pocket costs, and target prices of particular drugs for chronic conditions, but again, stay within the Affordable Care Act. What is your position? Would you push for Medicare for all, build on the Affordable Care Act, or is there another position you would take? And we're going to begin with Kiley Adolf.
Sure. I would support Medicare for all who choose. I think we can build upon the CARE Act that's currently utilized. You look at all of the Americans that members of our district who are currently benefiting from that particular act. I would also support legislation to help negotiate drug prices. We look at the impact that the ability to negotiate insulin prices for some of our older residents has had on their pocketbooks and their longevity and their health. So I would support for all who choose, and also support other remedies such as prescription drug negotiation.
Okay, thank you. Phil Goss, again, what is your position? Would you push for Medicare for all, build on the ACA, or is there another position that you have?
We need to start out with the supposition that health care is a universal right, not a privilege for the few. I do support a public option for health care. So whether that's Medicare for all or an expansion of the Affordable Care Act, some solution must be found, and I will be working towards whatever that optimal solution is.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to shift here. Student loan debt has been described as crippling for many younger Americans, and in some cases can be a barrier to important milestones such as home ownership and parenthood. What, if anything, should Congress do to help alleviate this burden? If so, how do you plan to address this issue as a member of Congress? We'll begin with Phil.
There are conversations going on about forgiving student debt. I certainly understand that. I also understand the other side of the coin that says, well, you incurred a debt, perhaps you should not have done so. I think it's important for us, however, to encourage education, as that is the cornerstone of our society. Whether that takes the form of student loan forgiveness, whether that takes the form of more subsidized universities, state universities are all subsidized. There are a variety of ways we can support education and education policy. So we need to find out what those optimal solutions are, what is in the potential solution set, and move forward on that.
Okay, thank you. Kiley.
Sure. I think that brings up a couple questions and a couple of issues that also are the foundational issues to the cost or to the growing student loan debt. I think first and foremost, we need to address the high cost of education in general. The cost of education is climbing, and it continues to climb. We know education is one of the greatest investments we can make in our society. However, it's becoming unattainable for many people here in our district and across the country. So I think addressing the cost of education is critically important. I think we can also have a conversation about lowering the interest rates on student loans. I think that hasn't been addressed enough, to where we look at, the calculation of student loan interest rates and how we're getting there, and how oftentimes they are higher than, say, a home mortgage rate or a car loan rate or something of that sort. So looking at the interest rates themselves that are contributing to the student loan debt, I think would be critical. I spent my first part of my career teaching in the inner city, so I was part of a program that if you stayed for X amount of years, a certain percentage of your student loans would be taken care of. And I think that there's some more that can be done to recruit teachers and retain teachers. We have a teacher shortage in America. So what programs and what levers can we pull to incentivize people to go into these necessary areas? But I think first and foremost, we have to really address the underlying causes, and that would be the rising cost of education and the interest rates themselves.
Okay, thank you. I want to shift here to inflation, which is a big issue for many. Obviously, some of this has to do with monetary policy that would be outside of the U.S. Congress, but should Congress do something directly about inflation, or should they be concentrating on specific drivers that are moving things up, like groceries, housing, as was already discussed, and childcare? So, Kiley Adolf.
Sure. I think that brings up the larger conversation about, putting the Band-Aid on the problem or addressing the foundation of the problem. And we look at, for example, you brought up childcare. In Indiana, there are families living in what are being called childcare deserts. So not only are they unable to afford childcare, they're unable to access childcare. So we need to address some of those underlying issues in order to combat inflation and bring inflation down. And that includes cost of goods, that includes things like the cost of childcare, that includes the things, cost of health care, elder care, all of those types of care that are adding to debt and causing inflation to continue to rise. So I think the more we can focus on those foundational issues that are impacting inflation, the more we can start to curb it, both in Congress and as a society in general. So addressing those out-of-pocket expenses for our families, including childcare and healthcare and elder care.
Okay, great. Again, Phil Goss, we're talking about how Congress should deal with inflation. Should it target it directly or deal with some of the specific drivers like groceries, housing, childcare, or something you want to raise?
I think inflation's here to stay whether we like it or not, and there's little Congress can do to change that. Capital costs are rising, and that's a natural effect of the baby boomer generation and their investments moving away from more aggressive types of portfolios and into more retirement-style portfolios. So capital costs are necessarily going to rise because of this generational change. As a result, what can Congress do? Well, Congress can respond at the downstream level. One thing Congress can do is to enact a far better minimum wage policy, where people are then empowered to deal with inflation as it happens. We haven't had a minimum wage increase in this country in 15, 20 years. It's been quite a while. Minimum wage should float with the cost of, with the annual rate of inflation of the cost of living, just as does Social Security. We should solve the minimum wage problem immediately, and then the downstream effects of inflation will be covered at least at one level, at the lowest level, among those who have the greatest needs. And that should be enough to, within Congress's ability, address the issues.
Okay, great. One of the very seldom things that has unified the two different parties in Congress right now is how they deal with the tech industry, specifically the criticism of the tech industry. But Congress hasn't really written much legislation in 30 years dealing with things, dealing with this. So I'm wondering what your view is about what Congress should be doing to regulate the tech industry generally, and if you have a view of how to get out front on a regulatory scheme of AI. And so we're going to begin with Phil.
AI is new enough, we really don't know much about it, but we're learning as we go, and that's exactly what AI does. How can we address AI concerns? I don't think we know yet, but we need to be prepared to do so as those concerns rise. Insofar as technology and the digital space is concerned, we need to enact better digital privacy laws in this country and better protection. American consumers are hit with all types of fraudulent data breaches and theft of their credit, their identity. We are under-resourced in our response to this threat, and it costs us billions and billions every year. I don't know the exact number, but it is an alarmingly high number. And so that's one of the other things we need to do in this country. It should have been done long ago.
Okay, thank you. Kiley, Adolf on regulation of tech and AI.
Sure, absolutely. I think the Congress has an opportunity to step in here and help with regulation, whether that's through regulation itself. I agree with Phil on looking at it from a data privacy issue and ensuring that there are protections in place, whether it's antitrust laws, things of that sort. I think another important aspect of this that we're not touching upon enough is the impact of youth, the impact that technology has on youth and mental health and things of that sort. So I think there are issues that arise from the utilization of tech in our society that go beyond just data privacy and antitrust laws and things of that sort that we also need to address. Great,
thank you. And again, we're going to move to one more question here and then open it to the audience here. And this is kind of an inside baseball maybe and presumptuous, but have you thought about what committees you would like to serve on, or is there a specific set of policies that you're aiming for? And we're going to begin with Kiley Adolf.
Sure. Great question. I think that first and foremost for me, it would be education and workforce. Given my background in education and workforce development, that is a huge passion of mine. I think there's a lot that can be done. Again, I live by the idea that the greatest investment we can ever make in our society is education. If you want development, invest in children. If you want development, invest in women. If you want peace, invest in children. If you want peace, invest in women. So I think there's a lot that can be done on the education and workforce development side. I've also done quite a bit of work with regard to workforce development in communities. So I think taking that skill set and being able to start and hit the ground running on day one would be incredibly impactful for our district and our communities. I think now more than ever, we need rational people who really believe in facts to serve on things like oversight committees. I think the more people we can get with that kind of mindset on that committee would be really important. And also a huge passion of mine, and it's something that's very important to me, not just because it's a large part of our industry and our district, but is the agriculture committee. And that is simply because I am the granddaughter of a farmer. I know the impact that district's farms have on our district, whether that's economically or from a national security perspective. So if I had to choose three, it would be education and workforce, it would be oversight, and it would be agriculture.
Great, thank you. And Phil Goss, what committees would you prefer to serve on? And if you don't know yet, is there a set of policy issues that you particularly want to focus on in your beginning parts in the Congress?
First, I'll be happy to serve wherever it's determined that I would be best to serve. But yes, I do have some ideas. I would like to serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I think that my time abroad, my perspectives, and my understanding of global issues lend themselves to the House Foreign Affairs Committee quite nicely. Secondly, as a farmer myself, I would be interested in serving on the Agriculture Committee. Foreign affairs and agriculture are indeed closely related, especially as we've seen the recent concerns of foreign governments or foreign entities buying up farmland in our country. So we need to be certain to address these common issues between the two. And third, oddly, would be the Rules Committee. The House has found itself in dysfunction. Part of the solution to that dysfunction is the Rules Committee. So there's my three.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm going to throw this out to people in the crowd. Again, people associated with the campaign, we would ask that you not ask questions, so we allow the other visitors to. So I can run the mic to people here. So if there are any questions, please raise your hand. Please state your name, too, if you feel comfortable.
Kathy Jakovic. If you listen to both gubernatorial and third district ads running currently, there's a lot of emphasis on Second Amendment rights. As you campaign and as you would take office, how would you address the gun rights issues?
Go ahead, Phil.
Comprehensive background checks and forcing gun owners to carry liability insurance are, I believe, essential steps towards gun safety. There was a time in this country when the NRA actually advocated for appropriate training and safety. That time ended 40 plus years ago, unfortunately. So we need to get to the point where government has to do what they used to do. And we need to advocate for that safety. We need to advocate for the economic disincentive to own firearms irresponsibly. And therefore, that's why I ask for liability insurance, just like you might have on your car.
Go ahead, Ken.
Sure. So I actually wrote down, I've been doing a lot of research on that particular issue, because to your point, it's been, they've been talking about it quite a bit and making assumptions about where we stand as Democrats. And I think first and foremost, we need to talk about the facts and where we are as a society. There are 393 million civilian-owned firearms in the United States. With firearm ownership comes responsibility, just like Phil mentioned. And we also have to recognize that mass shootings do not have to be an inevitable part of our everyday life in America, particularly for our children. I don't know if many of you knew this, but 2/3 of women killed by intimate partners are killed with a gun. And existing loopholes in federal and state law allow access to guns by their abusive partners. This was also a really interesting stat that I did not realize until diving more into this particular issue, that 99% of Americans live within 10 miles of a gun dealer. Now let's put that into context of reproductive health care. So in Indiana, in rural areas across Indiana, 21.4% of women live over 30 miles from a birthing center. 99% of people live within 10 miles of buying a gun. But women in rural Indiana have to travel over 30 miles to get the reproductive health care that they need. So I agree with Phil in comprehensive background checks, in common sense gun policy, and also in assault weapons bans.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, trying to think, sorry, I'm thinking about how to word the question, but how is reproductive rights a priority in your campaign, and how will you go about making sure that we have federal legislation to protect women?
This one will begin with Kylie Adolf.
Sure. Thanks for that question. Yes, absolutely, yes. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, a woman should not have to nearly die to be found worthy of living to make what the best choice for her and her family. Reproductive rights, I think we also need to talk about how it's more than just a singular issue, right? Reproductive health care includes access to family planning services, birth control, abortion care, and maternal care. And the part of reproductive health care that isn't talked about enough in Indiana is maternal care. The United States has the highest maternal mortality rate in the industrialized world. Indiana, the place we call home, has the 3rd highest maternal mortality rate in America. Women are dying. We also have the 7th highest infant mortality rate in the country. Women deserve to get the care they need. So yes, I will fight every day to ensure that there are national protections in place and women's reproductive rights are codified.
Okay, Phil Goss.
I believe in a woman's right to choose, and that there is no room for the government in anyone's private individual decisions, healthcare related or not. We are in a dismal state in Indiana with our refusal to place prenatal and neonatal care as a priority. But this goes back to the greater point that we have to be good stewards of our people. And that means these infants or prenatals who need care and whose mothers need care to survive. We should be doing this out of a moral and an ethical sense of duty. But of course, we should also protect a woman's choice to do as she sees fit for her own body.
Any more questions?
So, my name is Michael Shanabarger. Full disclosure, I am the communications director for the 3rd Congressional District Democratic Party. So both candidates already know me, but I am not with either campaign. My question would be about the Federal Medical Leave Act, FMLA, thoughts on avenues where that is weak and needs expanded, for example, paternity leave.
Phil Goss, we'll begin with you.
We need to have medical leave in this country. So many people are forced to work in a physical state where they shouldn't be because they're afraid of losing their job or losing what little health care they might have. We also need to support maternity leave and paternity leave. Most civilized countries in the world do this, and they can afford to do this. But our government, being the best government money has bought, seems to think that it's not important, or seems to think that a corporation's bottom line is more important than the care that a newborn child, needs and deserves from a mother or a father. So we need to have these things codified, because we like to think of ourselves as a civilized country, and yet there is much that has to be done here to reach that status?
Same question, Kylie?
Sure, thanks for that question, Michael. It's interesting when you start to look at our paternity and maternity leave here in America versus the rest of the world, and we've got a long way to go. So I think there are some effort that can be done there. It's also really interesting. I was reading an article recently, and they were talking about the impact of the necessity of care on individuals working for corporations. So companies and corporations are waking up to that as well and saying, you know, before people would look at benefits, whether it's, you know, some sort of fitness benefit or something of that sort, now they're offering benefits focused on child care and elder care, knowing that those are critical aspects of our society that are missing. So corporations and companies are recognizing that. The government also needs to recognize that as well, is that there's a necessity and a need for both maternal and paternal care, and also looking at it from the perspective of care more broadly, whether that's elder care and the maternal care.
Hi, I'm Sandy Junk. I'm with League of Women Voters, so I'm going to ask a voting question. From your perspective, I think we all know that Indiana, I think we're at the bottom for voting, for registered voters to show up to vote. What are your thoughts on, I think, a state's rights, like each state has their own set of rules for voting, or expanding that to, it's a more national thing where we all kind of have the same rights and responsibilities and rules to follow for voting?
This one begins with Kylie.
Sure. The idealist side of me is thinking, reaction to that is, yes, let's have it the same across all states, right? So everyone has the same right to vote. I think that would be incredibly hard to make that change given where it stands within the state's rights. I think there's a lot we can do to get more people out to the polls. To your point, you know, we are 49th or 50th in voter turnout, and voter apathy is a real thing. So what we're doing as a campaign, again, is just meeting everyone where they are, one person at a time, one vote at a time. We're getting out and meeting with diverse groups of people. We're going to universities and talking to young students about the importance of their voice and their vote. So I think the more we can get out to people, and also just quite frankly educate them on ensuring that they're registered to vote, letting them know where their polls are, letting them know that there's early voting. So I think the more we can do to educate our voters, the greater turnout we will have.
Go ahead, Phil.
There was a time when we had the Voting Rights Act of 1964. The Supreme Court saw it in their infinite wisdom to say that because it only affected certain southern states which had traditional institutional discrimination built into them, that because it only affected certain states, it was not appropriate to have such a law, that a law had to affect all 50 states equally. I would suggest that we go back to the Voting Rights Act of 1964 and make it apply to all 50 states. That would go far in addressing the concerns that have developed not only in the South, but everywhere, especially since Citizens United. We have to wrest back control of the dialogue away from the moneyed corporate classes, which are not human individuals. They are legal entities only. We need to wrest back control of the dialogue and motivate the people so that this becomes once again a government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Thank you very much, guys, for running. First off, Mark from My Labor Radio. I've been in town for quite a while, and I can say, let's clear a couple things up quick from the past. 1995, Jill Long Thompson was the last representative who was female in Congress in this district. And Phil, 2009 was when we last got a pay raise for the minimum wage. The tipped wage still sucks. Another story altogether. Specifically, I want to talk about the last Congress, not this current deadlocked Congress. Infrastructure happened and created a bunch of money coming back to states. A bunch of people voted against it, but those that supported it created a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunities to fix a lot of things, whether it's airports or farms or bridges and roads and things like that are getting built now. Your perspective, both of you, on infrastructure and growth from that perspective.
Thanks. We'll begin with Phil.
A reliable, well-developed, and well-maintained transportation infrastructure is essential for national security and economic security. We dare not waffle in support of that maintenance and that expansion, that construction, because it is what allows us to be and maintain, to be strong and maintain our strength.
Okay, Kiley?
Sure. Like we mentioned earlier, infrastructure plays a vital role in our economy, right? Not only in the jobs created through the legislation that was passed, but our infrastructure in general, whether it's our roads, our bridges, our waterways. They have an incredible impact on our economy. So not just in the creation of jobs by passing legislation, but continuing to maintain that infrastructure and build upon it. So I think infrastructure investment is one of the greatest investments that we've made here in recent history in Indiana. Thank you to the current legislators who are bringing money back and building out our economy through infrastructure. So I think continued investments in infrastructure are vital to our communities and our district.
My name is Ron Dukovic. I want to thank both of you for being willing to be candidates. I'd like to go back to immigration. Both of you have identified the need for comprehensive immigration reform, but there are two groups who are already inside this country who are not knocking at the door. One is approximately 11 million undocumented people, and the group that we identify as DACA, were brought here as children. I would like to know your specific steps to deal with these two groups. Kiley, I appreciated your use of the phrase "a path to citizenship," but in answering this question, I'd like more details.
Kiley, we can begin with you.
Sure. First and foremost, I'd like to address the DACA and the children that were born here. There are certain members of legislation who do not want to provide them any sort of protection and do not think that they belong here, but they do. So I think that if we can pass legislation to ensure that they have a pathway to citizenship, ensuring that they stay, because most of them have spent their entirety of their lives here, and they're vital members of our society. And building out those pathways to citizenship, we can look at it from a logistical perspective. We look at the logjam in our courts, right? So providing resources to our court system to ensure that they can get a court date, and then they can get there, and their paperwork can be processed. So it seems simple, right? But investing in the infrastructure system of our immigration courts would be a key step in ensuring that there's that pathway to citizenship. So the more that we can invest to ensuring that we can build those pathways, I think is key, and also offering those protections for DACA.
Okay, Phil Goss.
The situation with undocumented workers in this country is one of our own creation, because we have yet to implement a system which would document them efficiently and allow us to track them and allow them to be part of the society as migrant labor, as non-citizen migrant agricultural labor. They are an essential part of our economy. I was at the Farm Bureau State Convention just down the street here in December, where that was very clearly confirmed. So if we can implement a seasonal migrant labor visa regime that is available to anybody from, let's just say, Guatemala or Honduras or some other place. Of course, if they meet certain conditions, they have to pass background checks and so forth. As a consular officer, that was my job, was to adjudicate all kinds of visa applications. If we can do that, we can have documented people traveling here legally and working here as a part of this economy, an essential part of this economy, and not bringing their entire entourage with them. Also, it frees up their dependence on the cartels and the human smuggling that's happening at the southern border. So there are a lot of solutions in one simple solution. The solution we have right now is not one of, it's not successful because it's designed not to function. So if we can have the political will to implement the proper visa regime, we will cure many ailments that surround that. What to do with the undocumented that are here right now? Create an amnesty, get them registered, get them documented, and then allow them to function within that same system. So we can take the undocumented people who are here now, we can take those who would come here otherwise undocumented and create a system that will serve everyone's best interests. Secondly, insofar as the DACA, these are people who came here as infants or very small children. They are a part of this country, they're a part of this society, and it is foolish for us to send them away simply because they were born somewhere else. They're our people. We need to treat them as such. It is that simple.
Okay, and we're going to wrap up, but first I want to thank again the League of Women Voters for being here and to visit vote411.org to find out information key prior to primary election day. Also, again, want to thank the Fort Wayne Media Collaborative, Dave Gong and Brianna for doing a great job recording this. And more in particular, thank you for coming and taking this in. And finally, I really want to thank Phil Goss and Kiley Adolf for being here. So thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. 9 minutes. Thank you.